Back in 2018, I was in a difficult position. I'd lost my job working security for a local firm and was looking for something on short notice. Add to that, I was in a difficult situation with my then girlfriend. We were on a sort of pause. It was a strange time. In short, I was looking for a job, and I found one. There's this charity, which I won't name, that handles distribution of something called the Little Miracle Chest. These have been around since the 80s, but they're very limited in scope. It's these colourful toy boxes that are sent out to first-time parents, mostly in the southern East Coast states. They usually contain a couple of goodies, some parental advice books, a Bible, and a couple other things. It's been around for a while, but I don't think a lot of people talk about it. I read online that a local chapter handling the Little Miracle Chests needed permanent warehouse security, so I applied. I had one of those chests as a kid, and honestly, I loved it. I thought it was a nice callback, especially at a time when I needed stability. For the sake of brevity, I'll just say this up front. I've changed a couple of names around, including my own, just to make sure my position and the location stays anonymous. I met with a guy, let's call him Jonah, friendliest guy you'll ever meet. Early 50s. Honest living kind of guy, if you could look past the creepy horn-rimmed glasses. He looked like a cool dad who'd stepped out of a 70s commercial. Firm handshake, calming voice. I met him just outside the warehouse, and he had the most starched white shirt I'd ever seen. "Jonah," he said, shaking my hand, "and you must be Henry." "You got that right. Glad to be here. It's like I know you already. Do you want the tour?" "Gotta admit," I said, "I'm a bit nervous about the interview." "Interview?" Jonah laughed. "My friend, as far as I'm concerned, the job is yours. We got your application is all. You fit the bill just fine." "You sure?" I asked. "I figured you'd need some, I don't know, clarity. I got a good eye for people," smiled Jonah. "But I suppose I have one question that needs answering, if you're so inclined." "Go right ahead." Jonah put a hand up to shield his eyes from the July sun. The guy was clearly an outdoorsy type, being tanned from head to toe. "Do you consider yourself a nurturing man?" he asked. It was a perfectly fair question, but it was difficult to answer. I had this girlfriend, Jill, who I'd been seeing for about 8 months. We got along great, and had been talking about moving in together when she revealed something. She had a kid. I had no idea. It had been this thing she hadn't intended to hide. It just ended up that way. We got along so well, and by the time she wanted to tell me, it had gotten strange to bring it up. I don't think it was nefarious, but it became this strange, sticking point in our story. 8 months, and I'd never once heard she had a 5-year-old boy at home. At that point, I didn't know if things were complicated because I didn't want to be a stepdad, or because she'd lied to me. So, when Jonah asked me if I was a nurturing man, that's where my thoughts brought me. I zoned out a little, and answered as well as I could. "I'd like to think I am," I said, "but I don't know. Hard to tell." "Well, at least you're honest," smiled Jonah. "That makes up for a lot." With that, he gave me a tour of the warehouse. Row after row of little miracle chests, all wrapped in cellophane and ready to be shipped out. The little miracle chests are about 4 feet long, 3 feet wide, and has a rounded treasure chest kind of lid. The thing is made of some solid kind of wood, and has these metal handles bolted to the side. It's heavy, at least 30 pounds. On the side, you got all kinds of classic Americana printed. Boys and girls playing in the sun, a white church, green grass, a rainbow, happy couples leaning on one another, but also a few of adventurous motifs, like lions being ridden by young boys, or little girls feeding unicorns with blue sunflower seeds. It's probably the most sugar-coated, wholesome thing you'll ever see, if you haven't seen one already. Before we could enter, Jonah gave me a tap on the back. These things come straight from the printer, so we have these industrial fans going in there to keep the prints from peeling until they settle. So it's loud in there. All right. So we got these headphones, noise cancelling and all. Whenever you're in the main hall, you need these on at all times, or you'll hurt your hearing. We can't be held liable for that, Henry. We don't got that kind of money. Fair enough. He gave me the headphones and showed me around the warehouse. There was a definite chemical in the air. It was a prickly smell, like old lime and deep ammonia. It stuck with you immediately. Jonah showed me around the main hall, the loading dock, and the various entryways to keep an eye on. He pointed out a few cameras, all the light sources, and where all the emergency buttons were in case of a fire or serious accident. Once we got out of the warehouse, we put away the headphones and put them in a locker. There was this small adjoining office with 2 desks and an honest-to-God fax machine. Jonah explained a couple of details I needed to keep in mind. We got the place pretty cheap because the ground rests on aquifer, he explained. That's been shifting slightly over the years, causing a sort of incline. We've looked into contractors to help us compensate, but it's a steep bill. Long story short, Henry, you need to check to make sure none of the chests tumble off the shelves. We don't want them to break. Not one. Is that why you wrapped them up like that? I asked. For traction? Traction, and to keep the fumes in. You know, they're straight from the printer. We don't want you to get a wheezy lung. We want you around for a while. I appreciate that. Anything else I ought to know? Well, look at you, smiled Jonah, giving me a firm pat on the shoulder. Being proactive. I knew I picked the right guy. Well, since you asked, there's one last thing. He sat down on one of the desks, trying to look like a cool substitute teacher. I bet that move worked better on the younger folks. Well, 2 things, he admitted. 1, don't use the freezer. We've had to throw out a bunch of stuff because of it. And 2, do you know our motto? The motto? Yeah, the Little Miracle motto. Do you know it? You used to have one as a kid, right? And of course I knew it. It was written on the inside of the lid, so you saw it every time you opened it. God loves all his little miracles, I said. That's the motto. Hot diggity dog, Henry. I knew you were the perfect guy. He gave me another firm clap on the shoulder. A couple of signed papers later, and I was officially hired. There were a couple more things to keep track of, like where we stored keys, what to do at certain times, and how many hours of the day I had to stick around. I had an alternating schedule with a 3-week rotation. The pay was decent, but I had to scale back on a couple of things on account of only working 4 days out of the week. The extra pay for working the occasional weekend and night shift more than made up for it. All in all, I was only down about $100 or so from my last job, and this was both more stable and had better hours. Jonah was always around, mostly in the office. I saw him try to get that stupid freezer to work a couple of times, but they gave up and started using it for storage. Mostly charity merch, like hats and cheap jackets. The people who worked there struck me as harmless, but socially awkward. They would bring in the occasional plate of cookies, or wish me a blessed afternoon, but they would keep to themselves and give me a curious side-eye. Night shifts were a whole different thing. The little miracle chests look a bit strange in the dark. You have to consider the one I used to have was beat up and torn at the edges. These things were fresh from the printer. They looked nothing like my old thing. It had been thrown out somewhere around my later high school years. I grew up in a troubled home. I didn't know it was a troubled home back then, but it was. I was an only child, and my parents were constantly complaining about their financials. Whenever the two of them were in the same room for more than an hour, they'd yell. There was always something. The broken lawnmower, the extra shift that ruined our weekend plans, the cheap muffler, that strange noise from the shower drain. There was always something, and someone had something to say about it, and they had to say it loudly. I used to get so tired of it that I'd lay under my bed with a pillow over my head, trying to drown the sound out. That is until I realised that the little miracle chest we had was mostly soundproof. I'd put blankets and pillows in there and make it my happy place. I would spend a lot of weekends there with a flashlight tucked under my chin, reading or playing. And whenever I ran out of batteries, I'd imagine what was written on the page and just whisper it into the dark. Or I could be an astronaut for a while, floating through space. Or maybe I was a spy, hidden in the trunk of a villain's car. It sounds sad, but I never knew it was. I loved that darkness. It was my own, and no one could take it from me. I'd whisper my little truths into the void, and I felt like it understood me. Like it was a friend. I could imagine it saying, "You're our little miracle, Henry, and we'll always be here for you." And every time I looked up, there was that motto, "God loves all his little miracles." The job itself wasn't that demanding. I'd help out with the occasional loading at the dock, and I'd keep the place shut down and safe in the evenings. Most of the time, I was walking around the warehouse, listening to a podcast or an audiobook. The headphones Jonah gave me were these amazing $400 industrial things that worked as radio, communication, and media player. And he was perfectly fine with me listening to something while on my own. For all his quirks, Jonah was probably the most chill boss I'd ever had. There were a couple of times I had to step in. A couple of chests had slid a bit too far, and I'd have to wrap them up in more cellophane and put them back. Other times, the smell would get so strong that I had to step out for a while. I'd get chills from the overhead fans, and there was always something sticky to get your shoe stuck on. So it wasn't perfect, but what job is? But my troubles started for real when I started using glasses. I'd been riddled with headaches for a while, and Jonah gave me a day off to check with an optician. Turns out I needed glasses. It was a pain to get used to, but even more of a pain to wear them underneath the headphones. I'd get this chafing around the edges of my ears from the constant pressure. After a while, I decided to take a break from the headphones, if only for a while, just to get my ears some time to rest. That's when I noticed something peculiar. The industrial fans weren't really that loud, barely even a hum. I asked Jonah about it, but he insisted I wear the headphones, or at least earplugs. "It's an insurance thing," he argued. "It's really important. Please take this seriously, Henry." I didn't want to lie to him, but I did. Whenever no one was around, I'd put away the headphones. I'd still keep them around my neck if I needed to put them back on, but I'd keep them off most of the time. But that put another thought in my head. What about the floor tilt? Was that really a thing? The fans weren't so bad, so maybe this wasn't either. There was this water level tool in the office. I borrowed it from Jonah's desk and went into the warehouse. I checked the warehouse shelves one by one. None of them were tilted or at an angle. They were all perfectly straight. I had the day shift the following afternoon. There was a short moment before my lunch break where there was just me and Jonah in the office. He'd kicked his feet up on a chair and basked in the heat like a lizard. I'd only been with Little Miracles for a few weeks, but I'd already grown to enjoy the job. Asking questions about it felt shaky. Jonah looked up at me with a curious expression. "I got a couple of questions about the warehouse," I said. "A couple of things ain't adding up, and I need some clarity." "Well, Henry, that's what the good book is for," he smiled. "But I guess I could clear up some of the smaller stuff." "Let's start with the headphones," I continued. "The fans are barely audible. There's no way they could cause any kind of hearing damage." Jonah nodded with a slightly furrowed brow. "All right," he said. "Go on. And the shelves. You said the floor was crooked and that the chests kept sliding. I checked the floor and it ain't crooked. Shelves ain't either. So what are you asking me, Henry? What's this adding up to? There's something you're not telling me. If we're going to be a team, I need to know what's going on." Jonah got up from his chair and patted me on the shoulder. His frown softened into a trained, quiet smile. He held his hand out, urging me to follow him into the warehouse. We wandered over to the closest chest, and Jonah gently placed it on the floor. He unwrapped the cellophane, talking to me as it came undone. The smell of the print unfurled like a carpet, spilling over my senses. The ammonia could have choked me, but it was the old lime smell that stuck around the longest. "I can't tell you why they slide off the shelves," Jonah said. "It's just something we have to compensate for." He tapped the chest and opened it, showing me the simple wooden interior. It was empty, with the motto printed on the inside of the lid. "The headphones are a courtesy," Jonah sighed. "A couple of folks feel bad about asking if they can play music or listen to something while they're out here by their lonesome. We figure giving a free pass makes the time go a little faster. And well, we already bought the things." "Jonah, that can't be it. That can't be all there is." He closed the lid and wrapped the chest back up. "Here's God's honest truth," he said. "This entire organization is here to care for the good Lord's little miracles. And if we do what's expected of us, that's what we'll do." There wasn't a hint of a lie. I don't know what I expected. The chests were empty, and while the explanations were weak, they were at least plausible. It was enough to keep my mouth shut for a little longer. "If there's anything else, you know where to find me," he said. "Stick to the script, and you'll do fine." And for some time, I did just that. I patrolled those halls day and night, making sure the chests didn't slide off the shelves. I listened to my audiobooks, helped load the trucks, wrapped the chests in cellophane, and that was all there was to it. I had the thought that maybe Jonah had picked a specific chest to open, so at times I'd open others just to check, but they were always empty. For a full month, I didn't think much of it, that is, until one particular night. I didn't use my headphones that evening. My glasses were chafing again. I'd gotten a text from Jill earlier that night, and I kept pacing back and forth trying to figure out what to respond. Hell, maybe I shouldn't respond at all. The message was part apology, part explanation, and a reminder that despite it all, she missed me. Part of me wanted to say I missed her back. Another part wanted to walk away. Jonah's question still stuck with me. Am I a nurturing man? As I paced, I noticed one of the chests having slid a little further than usual. A full corner of the chest was hanging off the edge of the shelf. I put my phone away, slid the chest back in place, and stepped back. As I did, I heard something. It was low, like a mumble from behind a pane of glass. "Thank you." I looked back at the chest. I stared at it, dumbfounded. "You're welcome." There was no response. And of course there wasn't. How could there be? It might have been the wind, but a part of me knew it wasn't. That noise brought me back to those childhood summers, hidden away in the safety of my little miracle chest, while my parents threw dinner plates and novelty mugs. In the safety of that chest, when I whispered something, I'd imagine someone listening, and that someone would sometimes whisper back. And what I heard in that warehouse was exactly like I'd imagined that voice to sound like. From that point on, I started looking at the little miracle chests a bit different. I began questioning whether they were affecting me, or I was affecting myself. It had been such a small sound, barely audible. A whisper of a thank you. I could have misheard. I must have. The only other option was nonsensical. Chests can't talk, and I knew for a fact these were empty. But I couldn't help it. During those long hours of the night, I had to look a little closer, listen a little longer. And when I couldn't convince myself to stop, I tried to test them, challenge them even. I'd whisper at them, knock on the lid, or pick up and shake them a bit. Of course, nothing happened, but every now and then I'd see one of them twitch or rattle. Was it one particular chest that moved, or was it all of them? One night I didn't even bother to try. I just picked a chest and stared at it, waiting for it to move. I'd looked at it for so long that the image sort of blurred, like when you hear a word too many times and it starts to sound like a noise. Then, there it was. A nudge. Just a little, but clear as day. I rushed it, tore away the cellophane, and opened it. And of course, it was empty, and I'd accidentally ripped off part of the print. Just a corner where the lion was. I thought about lying to Jonah, but I knew better. Not only did he deserve the truth, but there were cameras to tell the full story. Not that I didn't think he'd believe me, but because it didn't matter. No matter if the chest moved or not, I'd messed up. I met Jonah in the parking lot on the way to the office. He carried a much too formal suitcase and a copy of today's paper. I caught up and told him flat out what I'd seen. The moving chest, and the subsequent unwrapping. Jonah nodded, then wielded his newspaper like a judge's gavel. "Henry," he said, "you're still the perfect man for the job. I know you are, and I want to help you." "Then tell me what's going on," I begged. "Tell me I'm not crazy." "How about this?" he said. "You heard about the storm?" It had been the talk of the week. A storm brewing over the weekend, with the brunt of it hitting later that evening. The sky had already darkened. We had a last-minute cancellation, and I got no one to help. If you can keep things in check this one night, I'll see what I can do. "Can do about what?" I asked. "What can you do?" "Henry, please," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "I'll see what I can do." I agreed. Things were going to be a bit different that evening. I was the only one on site, and there'd be no one to call for backup. That, and the storm was guaranteed trouble. We had to close the fans and lock down the shelves with plastic straps. And because the fans weren't running, I'd have to wear a mask with a gas filter, just in case the fumes got too intense. I was going to have to make sure everything was secure, which would be an effort and a half. Not even an hour into my shift, I started getting warnings about rolling blackouts in the area due to fallen trees cutting the power lines. 30 more minutes, and it reached me. The entire warehouse turned dark with a sudden click. The silence was so palpable that I could hear my heartbeat. It's surprising just how many noises are around you even when it's quiet. You kinda don't notice unless the power is gone. As the power went out, I could hear the wind picking up. It was pushing into our ventilation, making the warehouse fans squeak in protest. And with the first lightning strike, I heard the shelves rattle. Not because the ground shook, but because they suddenly moved. I checked the straps on the shelves with a flashlight, trying to figure out what had made them move. I noticed a particular chest on the mid-level that had slipped a bit, and I pushed it back in line. That was the one to keep an eye on. But as the second lightning strike collapsed into the woods outside, the shelves rattled again. And when thunder started to roll, I looked up. It wasn't just one peculiar chest. They were all moving. Some of them were actively fighting against the protective straps. Others seemed to shake, like a leaf in the wind. It's like something had kicked them, forced them into action. A couple of lids flipped up, revealing the empty insides. I could hear the cellophane stretch and strain against some unseen force pushing the chests every which way. Then, voices. What's happening? Who's there? Is it danger? I tried my best. I really did. I tried to ignore the movement and the whispers. I tried keeping them all still and secure, but one strap on the far end of the warehouse came undone, and one persistent gust of wind made the entire thing lean. I could see that it was about to fall long before I got there. It crashed into another shelf who bore the brunt of the weight, and luckily, it held. But one chest on the far end got loose. It collapsed to the floor and splintered on the concrete. Something leaked out of it. It looked like a water oil mixture, and it had this intense smell of old fruit. I grabbed what remained of the lid and moved it, only to see a small, translucent hand sticking out, no bigger than my thumb. Little claws curled around the fingertips. It was so white I could see its veins, where a pulse ought to twitch, but it didn't. It lay still. I let the lid go and backed away. "We die," a chest whispered. "We're dying," said another. "Mother, call for Mother." "Mother," they hissed and rattled, every chest, on every shelf, and as the hissing got louder, it turned into a wail, a cry for help, drowning into the raging storm. I backed away, not knowing what to do. A couple of straps were coming undone. Some shelves were swaying in the wind. And right there, on the floor, lay that splintered chest like a broken egg. "I'm trying to help," I called out. "I can help. Just please stop, and I'll help." "The Death Man," a chest hissed. "Fear the Death Man." "Mother, Mother." The calls got louder. A chant for Mother, for something to come help them. To deal with the Death Man. I couldn't stay. Defying the storm, I rushed out of the warehouse and into the parking lot. I was drenched in seconds as the rain fell sideways, but I much preferred the howling storm to whatever was happening on those shelves. I couldn't believe it. I ran for my car. I had to call Jonah. I'd gotten about 30 feet when I noticed something on the road ahead. It looked like an oncoming flash flood. Mud and trees and bushes being swept up into a big pile, roiling its way across the road. It was far off, but there was something about it. It looked out of place. I stopped for a second to look a little closer. It had eyes. It wasn't oozing across the road, it was crawling like a massive reptile. I'd mistaken its scales for tree bark. It was a creature. An unreal reptilian thing, and it was coming straight at me. And now that I looked at it, it was fast. I never made it to my car. I turned back to the warehouse. I sprinted as fast as my legs would allow and slammed the door shut behind me. 2 seconds later, the door imploded with a metallic twang, hitting me in the shin bone and sending me sprawling to the floor. "Mother," the chests cried. "Mother comes. Mother saves. Mother eats the Death Man. Eat the Death Man." Something groaned. It sounded like a tree bending in the wind, but there was a tune to it, and it repeated like the croak of an angry frog. The living. Mudslide reached into the warehouse, only to reveal a 5-clawed forelimb, each claw the size of my leg. It cracked the floor like wet sand. Then, a roar. The air rippled, and the pressure made my ears pop long before I even heard its sound. It was part hiss, part croak, and part shriek, all wrapped into one furious bellow that rattled the windows. I got back up on my feet, wobbling from the gash in my leg just as the thing reached the loading bay doors. Those are solid metal. I thought they'd hold for a while, but they bent wide open with little effort. It was like watching a rabid dog tear into a pillow fort. The storm spilled onto the warehouse floor. The wind shook the shelves as the creature stopped in front of the broken chest. A split white tongue tasted the air, each segment the size of a grown man's thighs. It poked around the splinters and looked up with a pupil the size of a bowling ball. "Kill the death man," one demanded. "Kill him! Kill him now!" "Mother, mother." The bellow rolled out of that thing like a revving engine. I saw claws sink into the concrete as it dragged itself forward, heading my way. I hobbled into the main office. I could hear that thing thrashing around, trying to follow me. For a second it stopped. I thought maybe the door was too small for it. Then I heard a scratching noise, like construction tools being dragged across the wall. It was going to break the entire room. I didn't know where to go or what to do. I could make a run for it, but that thing would be on me in seconds out in the open. I had to keep stalling it, but I didn't know how. It was protecting something. Something young and small, hidden within the chests. "I don't know what to do," I gasped. "I don't know what to do." I thought about Jill and not seeing her again. About never answering her last text, only for her to see my name in the obituaries. Then, a chime, a ringtone. Jonah had an extra phone in his top desk drawer, a cheap, disposable flip phone, and it was ringing. I pulled it out and answered, gasping for air as my eyes flicked back and forth. Jonah's voice came through from the other side. "Henry," he said, "I'm sorry it came to this." "What is this?" I gasped. "What do I do?" "Where do we go when we're scared, Henry? Where are we safe?" "That's what I'm asking," I yelled back. "What do I do?" "Think, Henry. Where are you safe?" I blinked. My mind snapped to attention, and I looked around the room. And there, by the window, was the broken freezer. I climbed into it, hiding beneath a pile of merchandise while the storm raged outside. I could hear the wall give way to tooth and claw as a primal bellow rattled the confines of the freezer. I just lay there in the dark, clutching the phone like my childhood flashlight. I calmed my breathing, listening to Jonah's voice. "Just like back in the day," he said. "What are you talking about?" Another bellow. Something bumped the freezer, making it wobble, but it didn't tip over. "She's upset with you," Jonah said. "She hasn't been socialized like the others." I didn't say anything. I just held the phone tight, closed my eyes and tried to breathe. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it'd be this bad. I just thought they'd get a little scared from the thunder, maybe show you something, but..." Another lightning strike in the distance. Thunder roared across the sky, and the creature outside thrashed across the room, trampling the desks and breaking the cheap metal chairs. I could hear a bookshelf crash, and seconds later, something smacked into the freezer. It fell over. The freezer collapsed to the side, but the lid stayed on. I had my breath knocked out of me with a violent thud, but I stifled my wheezing behind a handful of shirts. "Stay still," Jonah whispered. "Do nothing." I heard massive lips smacking as something wet dragged across the freezer like sandpaper. "She doesn't know you're a nurturing man," Jonah said. "She's mourning." I thought about Jill. And with death staring me in the face, I knew the answer to the question Jonah had asked me on that first day. I was a nurturing man. I had been all along, and if I could get out of there in one piece, I'd show them. I kept my eyes closed, just like I'd done as a child. I'd pretend the world was different as chaos reigned outside, that they were play fighting, or throwing pies like circus clowns. I thought back on those moments in the dark where I'd been an astronaut, ready to set off to distant planets, to make friends with alien life, or the moments when I'd read aloud from some comic book I'd bought with my monthly allowance. A white tongue slipped through the lid of the freezer, taste in the air. A waft of warm swamp breath swept over me as the creature snorted, looking for my scent. But that freezer smelled more like Jonah than me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'm sorry." "I know," Jonah whispered back. "You're still God's little miracle, Henry. We both are." Another low, rumbling bellowing. This one rippled through my body as if softening me up for a bite. The tongue protruded again, missing the sweat top of my head by mere inches. Then it stepped back. It dragged itself across the floor, pulling half the office along in a sudden U-turn. Order slips and receipts stuck to its scales, whipping around in the wind. Debris from broken desks and flattened chairs clung to it, floating along like a natural disaster. I lay there, tucked among the battered merchandise, listening to the howling storm. The worst had passed, and the warehouse chests were quiet. "I'm so proud of you," Jonah sighed. "So proud of what you've become." And I would stay there until dawn with Jonah, waiting for the wind to stop yelling. Most of the damage was covered by insurance. This part of the county was apparently prone to floods, it seemed, which was one of the reasons it was so cheap. Of course, there was no flood, but I got the sense that they knew that. I met Jonah a couple of days later on a park bench not too far from the warehouse. He was having yogurt and brought a thermos of piping hot coffee. We hadn't spoken since that night, but he seemed just as cheery as always. I wasn't. "I need to know what this is," I said. "All of this." He looked up at me, then back down at his yogurt. "Mango flavor." "I never lied to you," he said. "The Tapex is God's little miracle. We just make sure they grow up to be good. They need to socialize, to listen. So you send them out to children. You hide them in chests and just let them go." "It works," he said. "We rarely have a problem." "And what are they?" "In the wild, they're terrifying," Jonah shuddered. "But it's like with dogs. They can be your best friend, or roam in packs, looking for prey." "So that big thing was a wild one." "Not wild one," he corrected. "A poorly socialized one." "Then what do the good ones look like?" Jonah finished his yogurt, putting the little plastic spoon down. He wiped his lips and rubbed the tips of his fingers together, making a strange sound. His fingertips were solid, like sanded down bone. "They can look like a good friend," Jonah said. "A kind uncle, a goofy aunt, or a friendly boss who don't ask too many questions. Someone who knows you very well." I looked at him, past the horn-rimmed glasses and the calming smile. There was a tint to his eyes that I hadn't seen before, and a slight protrusion along his spine. "It's not without purpose, Henry," he said. "We're all just trying to be better people." He got up and stretched a little, then let his demeanor sink back into a familiar expression. "See you Monday?" he asked. "For the cleanup?" I got up, looked him over and shook his hand. "See you Monday." It's been a few years since. The first thing I did after that meeting was call Jill. It didn't take long for us to reconnect. She gave me every opportunity to back out, but I kept at it. And beyond all my insecurities and questions and worries was a life of calm and warmth. One that I could nurture into something beautiful. A a place with bedtime reading and early morning car karaoke. You might be surprised to know that I still work with Little Miracles. We got one of the chests at home. The creature that lived in it slipped out last summer, having grown too large to stay in the double-bottom floor. I don't consider these things a threat any more than I do a stray dog or an outdoors cat. I get it now. I get how they work, and I don't have to wear any headphones at work. They don't mind me hearing the voices. Jonah has never said it out loud, but I think he and I both know where we first met. He's been with me for a long time, all the way back to when I read books by flashlight. Thanks to him, I guess someone listened to all those times when I whispered into the dark. It's a good reminder that God loves all his little miracles, and maybe we should too. Hi everyone, thanks for watching. That was Little Miracles, written by Reddit's own u/saturdead. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, like, and drop a comment. It really helps me out and keeps the stories coming. And now, fun fact. Did you know that in Finland, every new parent actually gets a government-issued baby box? It's filled with clothes, blankets, and essentials, and it even doubles as the baby's first crib. Unlike the Little Miracles chests, though, those ones don't whisper back. I don't think they do anyway. Good night.